Crazy day yesterday, Chris. Rolled out of bed, saw some text messages from Miles Simmons and others who work with us at PFT, and my eyes would not accept, my brain would not process what we were seeing. Big changes for the Raiders, and by the end of the day, it was Pierce, Champ Kelly, Mark Davis explaining why he did what he did, somehow tying it to the trade deadline, which makes no sense whatsoever, but not much of it makes a whole lot of sense when you consider the bigger picture. My big takeaway yesterday was simply, if you're going to import the Patriot Way, you got to give it time. You got to give it time. You got to know on the way in it's going to take time, and it's just weird that Mark Davis pulled the plug. He never should have hired Josh McDaniels if he wasn't prepared to give him time to try to replicate the Bill Belichick approach to football.
Yeah,
and
no,
good morning.
I mean, good morning. Yeah, no, I mean, we've talked about that a ton. Remember, I mean, that was something I was beating the table for last year when people were calling for Josh McDaniels. You got to give it time. But I think also what plays into that, and I was shocked like you. Now, I had somebody that texted me the night, let's see, what night was that? So that was Tuesday night, basically saying, is that right? Yeah, Tuesday night, that they thought Josh was in trouble, right? That's the text I got. Now, I took that as like, yeah, he's in trouble. They lose another game or two or three or whatever. Maybe he's not going to make it out of the year, or, the year and the way it's going, he's not going to make it, much into the offseason as soon as the season's over. So I was shocked like you when I first woke up and went, what? It's like official, like he was in trouble like that, like holy cow, they cut him. I mean, they fired him already. So I was surprised, and of course, yeah, I second what you say there about the New England way, and it takes a while to build a roster and a team they want to. I also can understand some of Mark Davis's frustrations. We talked about this on Tuesday. They're a team that's in no man's land, absolutely no man's land. It's kind of like they're kind of just good enough they're going to beat some of the teams they should, and they're going to get like the number 12th pick in the draft and not really be able to get a quarterback and things like that we kind of discussed then. I think you look at some of the moves they made on their roster, all of that, the direction of the team, and then, just the optics of the fact that they went to the playoffs the year before he got there. I mean, they got lucky to get in that year if you really look at it, and who they played and the quarterbacks they played at the end of the season. But either way, those optics certainly went against McDaniels. And, I played for Josh. I worked for Josh a little. It doesn't make me happy to see this day here. That's for sure.
Some of the different theories and ideas that I've been kicking around, and Miles Simmons and I talked about it some yesterday, and I addressed it on the PFTPM podcast, and I've written items about it. Mark Davis, the common thread to 12 years of just kind of, what are they doing? And he's the guy making these decisions. Who's he getting his advice from? I'd love to know. We never will know.
Yeah.
Presumably. But I'd love to know what Tom Brady's involvement was in any of this. Because this is a guy who is still waiting for final approval. Although it may never come, he may never get a chance to buy 10% of the team at a 70% discount. Owners haven't approved it yet, and I don't think they're going to unless this deal gets redone in some way. But he's already got that relationship with Mark Davis through his involvement in the Las Vegas Aces, two-time WNBA champions. There's a friendship there. There's a collaboration there. I'd love to know, was a call made to Tom Brady? Did he know what was going on? Did he give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to the termination of a guy that he has a very close working relationship with and has had a lot of success with? And on that point of Brady, I said yesterday that the Patriot Way possibly just doesn't work anywhere in football anymore. That you can't find a locker room full of highly talented football players who will surrender who they are, will submit to almost a little mini military, a little mini militia, where the coach is completely in charge and you do whatever he says, all the way down to what you will and won't say to the media. You know how just they have those guys under their thumb in New England. Like, I don't think that works anymore. And I think the only reason it worked for 20 years is because Tom Brady was on board with it, and he was great. Without him, I don't think the Patriot Way ever gets off the ground, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly helped it. I know that. I mean, yeah, I think the Patriot Way, the Bill Parcells way. It takes a quarterback that's going to be selfless and, take getting yelled at and, mother effed at times and going to still have a smile and go, let's go to work and set the good example there. Yeah, it was the perfect storm of things, right? I mean, yes, I think you can look at that, in a lot of cases and go, I don't know if it would have worked if it didn't have this there. I mean, Belichick, of course, set things up in a way that were special, and he did some great things. But, yeah, they also, I think to your point, we were still kind of old school 20 years ago. The world has changed a little bit. The way the game is played is totally changed. That's where I think the Patriot Way maybe has not lasted the test of time here into the 20s or this decade here. I think there's a lot that goes into that. But, Brady, of course, was a huge part of that. But I still think, again, if you're going to get into that discussion of Brady was more important than Belichick, I'm not going to agree with you there. But it did help a lot to have a leader like that, let alone guys that were there already from the Parcells regime that could bring that all together, whether it was Teddy Bruschi or some of the other guys as well. I just think it all matched up at the right time. And, what do they say? It's timing is everything. And I think that was one that certainly fits true there.
I'm not saying Brady was more important than Belichick. I'm saying Belichick never gets anywhere without Brady. That none of this works without a great quarterback. And look what's happened since you've removed a great quarterback from the mix in New England. And look at the failures of all of the other Belichick lieutenants who have gone elsewhere. You don't have a great quarterback, it's not going to work. So you got to have a great quarterback who goes along with it, just like the way your dad went along with Parcells and understood Parcells was going to rip him from time to time. I think that's part of it. You have to have a guy who can play at a high level, who's willing to play that role of I get ripped harder than anybody else, and everybody else falls in line. Yes, sir, no, sir. And again, it doesn't work today. My point is it never would have worked without a Tom Brady or someone like Tom Brady who helps that offense go and really holds everything else together. Not that he's more important, he's indispensable.
Yeah.
It doesn't work if you don't have the great quarterback.
I don't disagree. I mean, we can go through all of them like that, right? I could go, well, I don't know if Chuck Noll and the Pittsburgh Steelers would be the same without, Terry Bradshaw. And, I don't know what Bill Walsh would be if he didn't have Joe Montana there and do that. I mean, I hear you there. I do. And I think
Steve
where
Young.
What's that? What's that?
Steve Young. Well, they would have found somebody.
I hear you there, but like I've said, Brady was awesome. I get that. But the first 3 Super Bowls, we talked about this before, the game wasn't about Brady. I mean, they ran the ball and they played defense and they asked Tom to, manage the game the right way. And then it grew to something else from there where it went to a whole nother level. And then Brady became, more and more comfortable and they started to go, whoa, the way the rules have changed and everything like that with defense and pass interference, they went all in on the passing game. But, yeah, I think, to what that does, too, with a guy like Brady, is, all the other guys, whether it's Edelman's, the Welkers, those guys that are kind of made from the same cloth a little bit, where it's just like we're gym rats, we're football players with all that. Brady is the perfect leader for that type of group because he was that. So, therefore, it kind of permeated through the rest of the football team, and I think that's where, it was a match made in heaven.
And in contrast, the guy to whom Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels pinned their hope was Jimmy Garoppolo, who, look, I saw somebody suggest yesterday that if they had known what was going to go on, maybe the Vikings should have called for Garoppolo to trade for him. Garoppolo, as we discussed on Tuesday, he's not mobile. He can't process. He's not accurate on a consistent basis, and he's hurt all the time. So this isn't the guy to build your team around, and that was the flaw. And I saw something that you said. I didn't watch the clip. I apologize.
That's okay.
I saw that you, on your podcast, were talking about how the draft this year was somehow instrumental in what ultimately happened. Give us the Reader's Digest version of your take in that regard. I'm curious about that.
Well, I think you heard me, talk about it a little bit on Tuesday. I think I've even hit it on in a few other weeks, right? Where I get back to, the Jimmy Garoppolo situation. I think you're spot on. Is certainly part of why McDaniels got fired. I mean, again, as we all know, as the NFL knows, I mean, Garoppolo and the agent got over on the Raiders and McDaniels who trusted him, right? So that was the first little issue. But, my thing is, I don't think they got Jimmy Garoppolo and were like, oh, wait, we're good at quarterback, right? I think there are people around football, people I talked to there with the Raiders, way before the draft. I think they thought, hey, we got options, and we're going to be able to get one of these young quarterbacks too. And I think there was a real thought of like, hey, we got Jimmy Garoppolo. He could be the bridge guy because we're going to have a guy that we're going to draft. Now, they obviously didn't get one and obviously didn't like Will Levis to take him at pick number 7. They liked the 3 other guys, I guess. But, I think that is where you do that type of move, and now it's, oh no, we're stuck with Jimmy Garoppolo, who has an injury history, hasn't played as well as people think he has. He's just been on a really good football team, right? And now we have no future or no bright light for the fans to look at and go, whoa, hey, we got him coming down the pipe here, and I like that quarterback with McDaniels, and McDaniels is going to groom him, and we saw what he did with Mac Jones, and that didn't happen, and I think that leads us a little bit to where we are, or at least a big part of it, because they're just, as we said Tuesday, they're in no man's land. It just doesn't seem any way to flip this whole organization and roster over to get some serious blue chip talented players on it.
And I think you throw on top of that the fact that on Monday night, the Raiders witnessed what Jahmyr Gibbs has been able to do, and they could have had him, right? They get who'd they get? Who'd they draft?
They drafted Tyree Wilson, the kid from Texas Tech.
Tyree Wilson, yeah. Right? The fact that the name is not coming to mind immediately is an indictment on the fact that he really hasn't done much for the team this year. They could have had Jahmyr Gibbs, and they saw what Jahmyr Gibbs was able to do. The whole Josh Jacobs situation was mishandled. There's so many things we can point to.
There really is.
As if you're inclined to make a move, you can bolster the case by saying, look at this, look at this, look at this. My loose hypothesis also is, Chris, piggybacking off of your point that they were eyeing one of the young quarterbacks, I think they were hoping maybe a C.J. Stroud would slide. Maybe Nick Caserio would get knocked wobbly by all that crap that was out there. And we know how it goes in the NFL. If you really love a player, you say bad things about him in the hopes that he slides down to you. Maybe the Raiders were involved in all this C.J. Stroud is going to stink talk from back in March and April, aimed at getting him to fall. We all knew someone was trying to get him to fall, and we knew it didn't work when the Texans took him. Maybe that's who they were looking at. I don't know. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.